Welcome! I'm Johan Nilsson.
And I'm Lincoln Murphy, and this is Impact Weekly. We're here to help you make your customers successful. Each week, we answer your most pressing customer success management questions by relying on our years of experience with companies around the world.
Let's get this going. Hey everyone, welcome back to Impact Weekly. We got a brand new question and let's get into today's episode. Here's the question, Lincoln. How do I create the best working conditions as a CSM in a SaaS startup where there are no set way of doing things?
Okay. I like that question.
Yes.
This is interesting. Okay.
It is. And I think we will, of course, answer this at face value, what this person is asking, of course, given he or she is in a startup. But I think what's interesting with this question is that we will touch on things that are relevant, even if you're not in a startup, if you're in a big organization, big team. I think there are some things when you start from scratch that you can really actually use even in an established organization. Yeah. So I think that's also interesting with this. And I think another part with this question is that we will get into it soon, is that most companies, or not, if not all, started off as startups, right? And I think there's some learnings to be done also when we think about it from a customer success point of view, what a startup has been through. And there might be some legacy things that we need to check in on and improve along the way. So a lot to cover, but what are your thoughts initially here?
Yeah, I was just looking back at the question. One of the things that I think is really interesting is how do I create the best working conditions as a CSM in a startup? The working conditions aspect is very interesting to me. And I think we need to start there, which is startups are not for everybody. I think we just need to be really clear here. Look, they can be fun. They can be exciting. But if you so what is the other part of the question? Where there's no set way of doing things, right?
Yeah.
If you need a set way of doing things, you thrive in an environment where there's a lot of structure and you can really take what's already there and run with it, you are probably not going to be super happy in a startup. On the flip side, if you thrive in chaos and love to build things build your airplane as you're jumping off the cliff, then working in an established company where everything is already set, like that's going to be miserable. So I think you just have to be honest with yourself, do some real sort of deep reflection on what you want, because the working conditions in a startup are what they are. And if you don't know what you're getting yourself into, you might be quite surprised. So I think right there, that's something to tackle. I always say, be deliberate in your career. I don't know how many times you've heard this, Johan, but I certainly have. And that is, hey, I want to be a CSM. I don't really care what kind of company it is that I work for. I'm like, wow, no. I would encourage you to go back and rethink that, because again, CSM in a very early stage SaaS startup versus a CSM in a very established company are almost just two completely different things.
And both can be awesome, right?
Absolutely.
Both can be super careers, super experiences. So I think actually when you say this now, like, I think this episode can actually help people also make that decision. And hopefully we might even help someone that was maybe not considering going into a startup to actually do it. Just being a little bit more aware of what they're getting themselves into.
Just knowing what you're getting yourself into, and knowing in a startup that some of the stuff that you're getting yourself into, you may not even know about. There's a lot of, you don't know what you don't know. And if that's what you like, if that's what excites you and that's where you think you can thrive, then by all means go for it. So hopefully maybe some people are on the fence. We can give them some intel here about working in startups. But I think that's the main thing. Just wanted to start with that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, we'll get into some more tactical and specific things, but I think that's the first thing you need to think about.
Yeah. And maybe we'll also just touch on that a little bit. What is customer success in a startup? I will generalize now, but I think companies, SaaS companies, they start off with a couple of founders. The founders usually do the initial selling of the product, if it's an active selling sales process, or if it's in like more of a product-led independently. There is the first couple of customers that come in are most cases generated by the founders themselves. They might be in the network. They might know these companies from previously and so on. Maybe some of them just do it as a proof of concept. Maybe they sign up just to on a very good deal and special conditions and so on. So there's some very special things happening to get a company started, to get the first initial customers in. And usually in the very beginning, there is no real customer success. That's done by these founders typically. And also in the beginning there, as you said, we build as we fly approach is very common here, where you spend a lot of time with these customers. Usually it's a little bit of a trial and error period where you want to learn from the customers, you fix things, adopt the product. That's the type of environment in the very beginning of a startup.
Yeah. One other type of customer that there can be, as you were listing out those different, where our initial customers might come from, I've seen this happen, which is other companies in the same investment portfolio. So you share investors, and a lot of that is done to just bump up the number of customers that a company has, a little bit of social proof, a little bit of faux traction. I think, I don't remember who said it, but we'll talk a little bit about product market fit later, but product market fit is when you have some number of customers that are completely unrelated. Right. So they came in on their own and they have nothing that ties them together. That's when you have a product that people, in those super early days, you're going to end up with customers from places that later on you might go, why were these people even our customers?
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's like the very beginning of a startup. But then as you move past that product market fit, you get more and more customers in. Usually the first kind of hires are maybe a sales account executive or sales executive that will help you bring in more customers. And then eventually you will start hiring the customer success managers or manager.
One.
Yeah.
One.
It seems from the question here, we assume it's just one person, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, so that's been my experience too. That what you just described there. Again, I'm sure there's lots of different permutations of the startup story, but essentially it's probably going to be something similar to that. Some traction is achieved, and now we need to make these customers happy. And sometimes at first, now we know as customer success professionals, that's not enough. We need to actually make our customers successful. But in the early days, we may not know what that actually means. And I think this is where things get really interesting. And actually, this is, to me, this can be a part of the fun part of working in a startup. You really are going to be spending a lot more time learning from your customers than you're going to be teaching or being prescriptive. You're going to be doing a lot more discovery with them because you have the time, but also you need to be doing this. It's a requirement. You're going to spend more time with your customers than you probably will get to later on. You might actually go on site and shadow them. There's this whole concept called customer development that was really big in the lean startup days. The concepts, I think, are still very much valid, which is really, it's understanding what drives your customers. Right. And in later stages of a company, we are in a position to say, okay, this is what's going to make our customer successful. In the early stages, we're more in discovery mode. What does success look like for our customer? And then from there, how do we, through the use of our product and then through all of their relationship with us, but initially it's how do we ensure that the customer is going to actually be successful? So it's first figuring out what success is, and then figuring out or creating a hypothesis on how we think we can get them there. And then using the whole build, test, learn, iterate methodology to apply that to what we do in customer success. So I think it's really exciting stuff. But again, if you need all of that already defined for you, then this is going to be a place that you might want to avoid. But if that's what excites you, This
Yes.
can be a really rich experience and
And I
can
think,
be applicable in other parts. If you say you don't want to be
yeah.
in a startup anymore and you want to be in a more established company, this stuff still applies. Like you were saying earlier, Johan,
Oh, yeah,
like this is not just for startups. That whole idea of understanding your customers, important later on too.
definitely. And
Yeah.
in an early startup phase, the founders, they will have very little time to do this themselves, most likely. So if you can be the voice of the customer here, doing a lot of this learning and really, this customer development and validating what value the product brings in reality, and bring that back in a structured manner to the leadership, I think that's huge as well.
You said voice of customer, which is something, again, that was a term that was used a lot a few years ago. And we hear it
Yeah.
in different circles these days, but it's not necessarily something that we hear about a lot. And I think it's interesting. I feel like we've in some ways gone away from that because it's almost like we know everything there is to know about our customer. We know
Mm.
everything that is going to make the customer successful. So it's almost like we really don't need the voice of the customer anymore. And I don't think that's true. Customers evolve, they change, they grow, markets shift, priorities shift. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you're not listening to your customer, you're going to be in trouble. Doesn't mean
Yeah.
that you do everything. You listen to a customer and you change everything there is to that you do with them. No, but you pay attention. In the early days, you're paying probably a lot more attention because you don't really know anything about your customer. And you're trying to figure out what's important, what's not, what's going to move the needle on their success, what's not, what is actual success for them, and what was a weird detour that we took.
Mm.
We went down the wrong path. I know in the very early stages of a company, we're going to be much more focused on the technical, functional, and administrative aspects
Mm.
of getting them up and running with the product and using
Yeah.
the product in functional ways. But very quickly, we'll want to figure out what is their functional use leading towards. So it's
Mm.
one thing to know that they're using the product. It's another thing to know sort of how they're using the product. And it's yet another to know how they're using that in service of something. Like what's their why?
Yes.
What's the objective that they're trying to accomplish? And so that's, again, very early days, we're just trying to get them to use the product. The other thing is in the very early stages of a startup, your customers are also much more likely to be early adopters, to want to use your product because they see the vision of what it could possibly do.
Mm.
So just getting them to use it functionally, technically, and doing administrative stuff through it, like that's going to be enough for them because they're self-motivated to use this in a way that they think is going to get them somewhere, even if it's a leap of faith on everybody's part. But later on, that's not the kind of customer that we're working with. That's not the situation we want to be in. But early stages,
No.
that's it. So interestingly, in situations like that, the customer is often much more willing to talk to you and to share
Yeah.
their feedback, but also share like what their vision is of the product and what the outcome is of using the product, because they're really interested in this. They're
Yeah.
into it. They see the potential, and you should take advantage of that.
Definitely. And I think we should, from like the early stage where when if we now look into where we're going, the next step from there, where you in the beginning there you are in this more learning mode. You are also in a lot of times you do everything for your customers because some parts are missing in the product or it's not already. It's some gaps there maybe. So you're doing a lot. You maybe just to get them to try your product, you spend a lot of time in the onboarding on, and then when you pass that phase, you're into this. You eventually get to a phase where you can't spend that amount of hours that you used to do, and you need to make the customer do more by themselves. Maybe more is all available to do in the product now. You quite quickly in a startup, you move through phases where you need to make a sort of a leap in how you do things. And I think that's one of the challenges when you get into a startup is that you have to both act today because everything is here and now, but you also very importantly need to build for tomorrow,
Yeah,
because otherwise you will never get to tomorrow basically.
I love that. Yeah, act today, build for tomorrow.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the real challenges, because in general, in startup mode, it's a lot of things coming at you, and it's a lot of firefighting usually. And it's very hard to actually take these steps that you need to have a structure that makes the company scale. And I think we should touch on a few things you can do, as in the example from the customer, from the question here, where if you're a one-man show at the moment, what can you do here?
So we were talking before we started recording. You had a couple of examples of some very specific things that you could do.
Yeah.
One was if we were doing things for them, which I thought was really good.
Exactly. Oh, even if you're one person doing everything basically with your customers, there is no one else. It's important to put on different hats, if you like. So you are the customer success manager, you are doing the onboarding, you are also doing the support, and maybe you're also doing some of the configuration or setting up integrations or building reports or whatever you're doing. So you're actually one person doing 4 or 5 roles. Try to build a structure where you actually have, even if you are the one answering the support tickets, set up a support email. And from the customer's point of view, that's a separate person, basically. They don't need to know that it's you also answering there.
Yeah.
And also another thing is that even if you are building or configuring, or actually maybe even a developer is setting up things as part of just getting the customer in, set a fixed amount of hours that are included, and don't leave that open-ended. So you can do things like that to basically help yourself with establishing this structure. And eventually you will have more people behind these different hats. So it's not going to be you, but it's very important to start setting up that structure.
Yeah, I love having a CSM that also does support, but hiding that support role behind a unified or generic inbox, just support at, and then having the CSM set aside some time blocks to work the support tickets. That does a few things, everything you said, but also like later on, when we do get to hire a support person, now we don't have to go back and remanage expectations with customers to say, hey, now take your support issues to this person.
Yeah.
From the very beginning, support tickets were opened through support at. Now, that happens to be managed by a dedicated person in that role. So think about things like that. How can you manage expectations properly from the very beginning? Now, of course, you're not going to be able to do that with everything. That's something to think about. The other thing to do, if you can't do that, I don't know, like you're talking about configuration, maybe a developer is doing that or the CSM is doing that sort of behind the scenes or for the customer. I say keep that behind the scenes. Don't let the customer know that you were doing that. Make them think the system did it. If the system is going to do it down the road. Otherwise, what we're doing is we're giving them the expectation that there's going to be somebody there, a developer or you, who will always do these things for them. Just hide that if you can.
So instead of having them send you the spreadsheet or the CSV field to your email, have them upload it and then you download it and you do the work.
You get it.
That type of thing. Yeah.
People only knew how often that is exactly what's going on. So just keep the illusion, right? And then later on, maybe the field where you upload the spreadsheet actually takes the spreadsheet and processes it for them. But to your point, if you can't hide from that, just be upfront about it. Look, we're going to do this for you. We're still trying to figure out how to make this process work efficiently. So we're going to give you X number of consulting hours to do this work for you. Later on down the road, or if we go over that amount of time, we'll have to talk about that. Maybe that's something you'll pay extra for. Or ideally what we're going to do is we're going to roll that into the product so you can do that yourself going forward. So what you're doing is you're managing expectations with people who should know, right? They should know that I'm working with a startup here. Things are probably going to change down the road. But remember, people don't always think the same way that we think or that we think they should think. So it's probably best to just be explicit. Like what we're doing now might be different down the road. Okay.
So training could be another example of that, where you instead of doing like one-on-one trainings, individual trainings for each customer, actually have them sign up for a webinar, even if there's just one customer on the webinar, right? But that's also building a structure that basically is setting yourself up to add more people, to have more clearly defined roles. Because too many times in a startup, you have a CSM that's really, they are just bombarded with things and there's no end to it. And they get burned out and you get burned out, and you have to manage this.
I love that idea. And the great thing about a webinar is you can't see how many other people are on the webinar with you. So not a Zoom meeting where you can see, but a webinar. So I could be literally broadcasting to one other person. So that's fantastic. Set up a weekly Q&A webinar for your customers and just deflect things to that. So unless it's urgent, if it's other questions and stuff, you could just have that, or maybe do it a couple times a week. But the point is, to your point, think about ways that you can create some scale there versus just doing everything one-off with all of your different customers. A good rule of thumb, I think, is never answer the same question privately twice. So whatever it is, whether it's a business or a strategic question, or if it's something to do with your product, certainly, if you get that question a second time, that question needs to go into a knowledge base somewhere and along with the answer. If you are just answering the same question over and over with your customers, you're wasting time. And you're also not teaching your customers to go look for the answer somewhere, right? Now, I would say, if you really want to get ahead of it, any question that you think anybody else might benefit from having an answer to, just go ahead and put that in a knowledge base. And on it, honestly, I would put it in the knowledge base first. And then as my answer to their email, I don't answer the question. I send them a link to the knowledge base article. So now, again, unless it's urgent, because this is going to take a few more minutes, but now you're also teaching them to go to the knowledge base first. Things like that. You're still answering the question. It's just, how can we take that thing that we're doing and structure it for scale down the road?
Yeah, that's a great point. But also we need to realize that this, as we go through these different phases, there's also a big risk here that we don't let go of things how we used to do them as the product matures, as we get better at having the right type of customers coming in. We need to also be aware that we have to let go of some of the things we used to do and move forward, basically, because in the beginning, how you do things, that won't be efficient going forward. So that's why we want you to set these structures in place. And in the beginning, and I think we will get to that a little bit later, but in the beginning, in a startup, you might bring in all the customers you can, and you don't really know what's a good fit. And that may be okay in the beginning, but eventually that needs to stop as well.
Yeah, we don't know what we don't know, right? That's the great thing about a startup, but it can also be a negative, especially. And it doesn't take too long for that to start to weigh things down, because we didn't know what we didn't know. So we just signed as many customers as we could. We talked earlier about the different kinds of customers we might have early on. Those may or may not be our ideal customers, probably won't be. They may or may not even have success potential. They might just be straight up bad fit customers. And we call this legacy baggage. And the great thing about legacy baggage is it can add up real quick. It doesn't take long to have a bunch of customers that really we would be better off probably without. And so we need to figure out how to deal with those. And I think this, goes back to having a really clear understanding of what success potential looks like. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But knowing how we need to address this fact that we're working with customers that no matter really what we do for them, like, they're not going to be successful. So we need to manage that in an elegant fashion. So be clear about this with your leadership, but it's a real thing. And of course it happens no matter what at any stage, but in the early stages of a startup, it's a lot easier for people to, I'll say, get away with just bringing in any and all customers. You can use that as an excuse, right? We don't know what we don't know. So they wanted to be our customers, so we signed them up. Later on, when we do know what we do know, it's harder to make the excuse what we didn't know. So now that said, sometimes we do know, and we still sign them because
Right.
sometimes we need the money. Sometimes
That
we want
could
the
be the
company to
case.
keep going.
It's also important to that's why I think this legacy baggage, you need to, in a startup, you need to constantly evaluate. Yeah, that's what we did that 6 months ago, but that's not okay anymore, right? Because
Mhm.
we learned that these customers they don't have success potential. We now have, the customer can do these things by themselves now. We can't spend our time doing that. So it's also about being decisive here and making some decisions along. You need to evolve your customer success quite rapidly during a startup when you hit new phases, basically.
Yeah, this is where prioritization comes in, and just being intellectually honest and having the tough discussions with your leadership to say, look,
Mm.
if we continue to try to provide these customers with the level of interaction that we have been giving them, considering the fact that they don't really have success potential, we're really just wasting time and resources on them. And we're not focused on the customers that do have success potential, and we're not it's success potential, right? It's not success guaranteed. So we need to help them
Yeah.
unlock that potential. What do we do? Again, prioritize, and we shift resources to the customers that are going to move our company forward. It is a delicate balance because you also don't want to let down customers who's helped you get to where you are, right? You don't want to be punitive. You don't want to literally punish
No.
customers because they were there for you in the early days. But we do have to be realistic about what we can and can't do for them. So just that's going to be something
Yeah.
that you're probably going to look at all of your legacy customers at that point and segment them even further to say, you know what, these customers, not super high value, no success potential. We're going to let them just churn. And these
Yeah.
customers, no success potential, great logos. We'll do whatever we can to keep them around because they're going to help us get more customers. Okay.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
It is. Exactly. I think that's the kind of candor and open discussion you want to have. But you want to have it based on reality, and you want to have it based on, so you don't just keep going, right? Blindly into next month, next quarter, next year. So you need, I think, to have this success potential checklist, and that you probably want to review every 6 months in the leadership team. You have some kind of a leap of faith type of scenarios that we're okay with, but also you need to be clear when we hit the rock and it doesn't work. We need to update that list.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about success potential checklist before we were done here. So I think now is as good a time as any.
Yeah.
So just to be really clear on this, you'll often hear us, but just anybody in customer success talk about a bad fit customer. And what a bad fit customer really is, it's a customer that doesn't have success potential. You could say it either way. But basically, it means no matter what we do for this customer, for various reasons, they're not ever going to be successful with us. And it's for those various reasons that we need to be clear on this. I need to have a checklist that if I can go down that list and I can check all the boxes, I can say with certainty that if this customer does what we need them to do, then they will be successful.
Yeah.
If I cannot check all of those boxes, then regardless of what the customer does, like, they're not going to be successful.
Yeah.
So this could be something like the product, we don't have features they need to help them achieve whatever business outcome they're looking for. It could be they need training. They need customized one-on-one training. We don't have the resources to do that. Okay. So right now, this customer is a bad fit. Now, this is a moment in time, though. Success potential checklist is a moment in time. Yeah. Later on, when we have a training organization, that's fine. This customer would now be, assuming that's the only thing that we didn't have in place, this customer would now be considered to have success potential. But again, it's just potential. This is like your minimum viable customer. This is just saying they have success potential with us. This isn't your ideal customer. Your ideal customer is somebody that has success potential, but has other characteristics that are maybe indicates that they're a type of customer that we want to pay money to go after. Like, we want these types of customers that only have success potential, who are not our ideal customer. We'll totally do business with them. We're not necessarily going to pay money to go seek them out, right? We're not going to have dedicated campaigns to go after customers that that have the bare minimum success potential with us. But that's the difference between success potential and ideal customer.
Yeah.
But this is something you can start working with from the very start. The difference in the early stages of a startup is that your success potential checklist is probably going to be more of a warning system than a true filtering system. And so what I mean by that is in later stage company, not even, it doesn't have to be a company that's been around 20 years. Just as you are more mature and you know what, when you understand what it takes for a customer to be successful, your checklist is going to be more rigid. And you will say, this customer, no matter what we do, they're not going to be successful. Ideally, even in the sales cycle, we qualify them out, right? Because they don't have success potential. Okay.
Yeah.
Early stages, we can't do that. But the expectation from the customer also is, it's okay. I know that right now,
Yes.
I know that there's some features that are missing. I know that you don't have the training. I know that the user experience is not perfect. I'm okay with that. I like what you guys are doing. I think the functionality that is there is going to be helpful. And I know that you're going to build on this roadmap that you have laid out. I'm here to go along for the ride with you. Okay, cool. As long as everybody understands, like right now on paper, there seem to be some things missing. As long as you're cool with that, then we're good. So it's just a warning system. It's an indication that you should have a conversation about this. Right. That's all. So that's the difference between success potential checklist in the early stages of a company and what we generally refer to when we're talking about customer success in later stage companies. All of this we've talked about this a million times, but all of this is just making sure that we're managing expectations with everybody involved.
Yes.
Right? Honestly, if we just did that more in our lives in general, I think we would all be better off, but certainly with our customers and our leadership.
Yeah. Cool. So with that, I think it's time to wrap this episode up. And the question again, how do I create the best working conditions as a CSM in a SaaS startup when there are not a set way of doing things? Are 3 takeaways to this person. I'll go first. So number 1 here is that we said this, startups are not for everyone, but if you are aware what you're getting yourself into, I think it can be truly a great experience, and your learning curve will be accelerating when doing this.
For sure. I think number 2 is managing expectations with everybody, the founders, the leaders, the customers, and I think more importantly, yourself. So going back to knowing what you're getting yourself into here, manage your own expectations when it comes to working in a startup, and you'll be in a much better place to thrive.
Yeah. And the last one here is don't get caught with the whirlwind. You need to act today in a startup. Every day you need to act, but you also, very importantly, need to build for tomorrow. So those are our 3 takeaways. Thanks for listening, and see you back soon. Hey, thanks for listening. Do you want to bring your customer success to the next level? Check out Impact Academy. We have training programs for customer success managers and for leaders in customer success.